Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Never a Bride by Gayle Callen, narrated by Olivia Thompson. Prologue. London, September 1588. At the top of the marble stairs, tall windowed doors swung open, and the Queen's courtiers within the great hall turned to stare, knowing that the moment they'd all waited for had arrived. A petite woman stepped into their hall, flanked by two men, identical in every way, from their black hair to their swarthy skin to their midnight eyes. Even the orchestra faltered as whispers spread out in a hiss. One of the brothers was Viscount Thornton, newly returned from spying on their enemy, Spain, before the Armada had sailed. His heroism had been lauded by Queen Elizabeth, and his bravery had won him the hand of his wife, Lady Rosalind. The crowd surged forward to ingratiate themselves with the new hero. Then the tide seemed to flow backward as they all hesitated. Which one was Lord Thornton, and which was his scandalous brother? No one wanted to congratulate Sir Alexander, who'd spent almost a year and a half deceiving society when he posed as his brother, spending money that wasn't his, misleading noble maidens with the lure of marrying a viscount. His scandals had shaken London to its core, and were clear proof of who deserved the viscountcy. Just when the confused murmurs rose like bees buzzing to protect their hive, one of the brothers stepped aside and bowed to the couple left standing on the last stair above the crowd. Concluding the obvious, the courtiers swarmed forward, swallowing up the Viscount and his wife. Alex Thornton was glad for the escape, even though his brother shot him a frown over the heads of his adoring audience. Alex winked and turned away, grabbed the first tankard of ale that floated by on a servant's tray, and drained it quickly. He hadn't even begun to get drunk when he saw Lord Manville, who'd been working with him on a bill for the House of Lords. Alex pushed his way through the crowd, then called, "Manville, might I have a moment of your time?" The man turned from his wife and smiled beneath his huge moustache. "Lord Thornton, welcome back." Alex gave a lopsided grin. "You're actually speaking with the knight instead of the Viscount. I was wondering if you had some time to discuss that bill we've been—" Manville held up a hand. "This is highly improper, Sir Alexander. Such private business among the lords can no longer be your concern." Alex widened his eyes, trying not to let this newest slight affect his temper. "But I'm the one who wrote the bill." "Nevertheless. It is Lord Thornton himself." Alex turned to find his brother standing behind him, obviously having overheard the humiliating encounter with Lord Manville. To make matters worse, Spencer was trying to hide his worry and pity. Alex grinned. "There you go, Manville. Just the man you needed. I'm sure you can bring Spence up on all the details." "Alex, don't leave us," his brother said. "You've hardly had a chance to familiarise me with all your work. Lord Manville, I'm sure you see the necessity of—" "Nonsense!" Alex interrupted, backing away. "Manville can explain the whole thing. I'm done with all this, remember? And 'tis about time too." He grabbed another tankard of ale and leered at the maidservant carrying it. Then he went off to find the first of many maidens he would woo away from their outraged mothers for a dance. By midnight, he had propositioned 2 married women, one of whom had slapped his face, and the other, well, he'd find out her thoughts on his behaviour later that night, in her bedchamber. It was good to be himself again. Scandal was what he did best, after all. 1. London, April 1589. Alex Thornton was fresh out of new scandals. Standing beside his friend, Edmund Blackwell, he sighed as he watched the hall full of glittering couples dancing merrily beneath vaulted ceilings. It had been 8 months since he'd given his twin brother Spencer's identity back to him. 8 months of constantly explaining to disappointed people that he'd only posed as the Viscount. Alex had vowed to enjoy his own life again, without the responsibilities of a noble title. He would do as he pleased, drink, gamble himself into oblivion, and find willing young women to enjoy it all with him. Sad to say, those pleasures had grown almost tiresome of late. Each party blurred into the next. He needed a change, something new to interest him.
"Edmund, are you as bored as I?"
Edmund shrugged, and his gaze surveyed the crowd.
"I doubt it."
Of course Edmund wasn't bored. He hadn't grown up among the nobility. He was one of those rare men who'd worked hard since childhood to achieve success, and had been knighted for his efforts. Alex almost envied him.
"We need to enliven the evening," he continued. "I propose a wager."
Edmund rolled his eyes.
"You know you can outdrink me." "No, something new."
He met the bright gaze of a lady and gave her a smile.
"We seem to have the attention of several young women this evening." "Until their mothers see where they're looking,"
Edmund said dolefully, folding his arms across his chest.
"And there is our challenge. I wager that I can get one dewy-eyed innocent to kiss me before you can find one who'll kiss that face of yours." "A virgin? I'd be beetle-headed to accept such a thing."
Edmund scoffed.
"You've stolen kisses from half the girls here." "Not the challenging ones, I haven't," Alex said. "To make this interesting, I shall pick out the girl for you, and you shall pick out mine."
A slow grin eased Edmund's deceptively hard face.
"I'll wager 5 sovereigns. But what happens if an angry father decides that one kiss compromises his daughter?"
Alex shrugged.
"We have to marry sometime, do we not?"
"As if you would ever be trapped against your will," Edmund said.
"Very well. I'll be magnanimous and allow you to choose first."
They turned to look out on the great hall. Couples whirled about, and women were lifted in the air by their partners. Crowds of people talked and ate and laughed. Who to choose for Edmund? Then he saw her. Blonde, pretty, and not ranked highly enough to look down upon Edmund, who'd begun manhood as a common soldier. Due to her overly protective family, it would be difficult for Edmund to get even close to her. Alex cleared his throat and clasped his hands behind his back.
"I have the perfect girl, Elizabeth Langston."
Edmund looked doubtful.
"Her name is not familiar."
Alex pointed to where she stood, alone with her parents.
"She is quite beauteous,"
Edmund said.
"But surely you had a specific reason in choosing her. I shall just warn you to beware her father and her brothers."
Edmund sighed and continued to search the crowd. Finally he displayed a triumphant smile.
"Ah, now there is a woman who'd be a challenge for you."
"Who?" Alex asked, feeling a pleasant sense of anticipation. Edmund inclined his head toward the merry dancers.
"Lady Blythe Prescott,
the younger daughter of the Marquis of Kent." When the crowd parted, he saw her laughing face, her shining hair the colour of the finest chocolate from the New World. Though he'd never conversed with her, he had often noticed her loveliness and her musical laugh. He was almost disappointed. Oh, she was pretty, but the flirtatious glances she bestowed on every dance partner suggested a woman easily kissed.
Edmund laughed. "Do not be so disgruntled, my friend. She will be no challenge. Is there something you are not divulging?" Alex asked, his interest returning as Edmund smirked. And then he saw another woman, an older, paler imitation of Blythe, approaching the girl while wearing a censorious frown. Blythe gave her partner an apologetic look, slid her arm into the other woman's, and walked away. "And who is that?" Alex demanded. Edmund grinned. "That was Lady Emmeline Prescott, Blythe's sister." "Let me guess. A spinster," Alex said with a groan. Edmund's smile showed almost every tooth in his head. "I am certainly going to relish taking your money. You haven't won yet, my good man. There is not a woman born I can't cajole. It will be easy to elude one sister in pursuit of the other." Edmund gave him a formal bow. "Then I wish you luck, sir. You'll need it. Shall we begin?" He took himself off without a backward glance. Alex's gaze returned to the two sisters, now standing together near the banqueting table. Blythe's smile was lively as she listened to her sister's obviously serious words. Emmeline had none of Blythe's vivaciousness, and her dark hair had a reddish tinge to it. Perhaps if she smiled occasionally, she would have ensnared a man by now. Yet she was the daughter of a marquis. Surely men must be lining up at her door, if only for a share of her wealth. So why had she never married? Hell, he didn't have to care about the sister. He only had to outwit her. And for that to succeed, he had to win the younger sister's cooperation. So he began to follow Blythe about the room, sending longing glances her way, ready for the moment their eyes would meet. It came as she was talking to Emmeline, whose back was to Alex. Over Emmeline's shoulder, Blythe glanced up and saw him there, not 10 paces away, watching her. He held her gaze and gave her a slow smile, tinged with a slight wickedness. It was something he was naturally good at. Blythe smiled back, and her cheeks pinkened delightfully. She returned her attention to her sister, but she eventually glanced at him again. He inclined his head, and this time her entire face reddened. He beckoned with one hand. A miscalculation, for her smile faded, and she looked away. Very well. He had tried the easy method, and was relieved that Blythe would be more challenging. The moment Emmeline left her side, Alex was there, bowing before Blythe. That lovely blush returned to her face. "Lady Blythe," he murmured, reaching for her fingers and kissing them. When he didn't immediately let go, she disengaged her hand from his. "Good evening, sir," she said, a reluctant-looking smile on her face. "Have we met?" "No, my lady. But how can any man not know your name? I am Sir Alexander Thornton, and I would gladly pay a king's ransom to dance with you." "An exchange of coin is not necessary, Sir Alexander," she said, followed by a spirited laugh. "Dancing is such a joy that I'll gladly indulge you for free." And then he whirled her out into the crowd. Lady Emmeline Prescott had once again misplaced her sister. She wanted to stomp her foot in frustration. But even in childhood, that had never gotten her way, especially after her mother had died. Emmeline had learned at an early age that her father expected her to rely on herself. But watching over Blythe tested her very intellect and patience. Emmeline sighed. Her sister was a good girl, just high-spirited, and seemingly unaware that her dowry and her beauty made her a worthy prize to men. Surprisingly, a dowry alone did not seem to matter, since Emmeline, a wealthy heiress in her own right, seldom had male callers.
but she preferred not to dwell on what could never be. She had Blythe's happiness and romantic success to worry about. Emmeline was determined that her sister would have the husband she herself never would. She would be a part of Blythe's family, a dear aunt to Blythe's children, and know the peace of seeing her sister happy. If only she could keep Blythe from mischief and help her to settle on the perfect man. Then she saw her sister in the midst of the dancers. Who was she with? Every time Emmeline almost caught a glimpse of the tall, dark-haired man, someone stepped between them. She skirted the edges of the hall, keeping out of the way, until she could finally see the couple. Her sister's partner bowed as the dance ended. When he straightened, Emmeline felt a jolt of awareness. She had seen him from a distance at court. He was broad-shouldered, with a litheness that made him an excellent dancer. Short black hair framed a face distinguished by olive skin, and the only clean-shaven chin in the hall. When he smiled at Blythe, his white teeth were blinding. A pearl ear-bob dangled from one ear, above a brocade doublet, well tailored to his impressive chest, and a short cape that hung back from his shoulders. Oh, he was too handsome a man, perhaps even of foreign birth. Suddenly, he looked directly at Emmeline, and she managed to meet his unsettling gaze with a cool nod. He laughed and swept Blythe into the next dance, leaving Emmeline to feel strangely thwarted, which was absurd. It was easy to discover his identity among her acquaintances. Sir Alexander Thornton, the younger son of Viscount Thornton. She was quickly informed of his half-Spanish heritage and his dubious reputation. Her acquaintances made clear that he was not interested in marriage, that he was a favourite of the Queen, and actually kept mistresses. Mistresses! Sir Alexander was not a man Blythe should be trifling with. Her sister usually reserved her flirting for young men close to her own age, and Emmeline knew a stern warning would only make Blythe do the opposite. Surely there had to be another way to keep Sir Alexander away from her sister. Just then, the man had the gall to meet her gaze over her sister's shoulder and grin at her, leaving her flustered and all the more determined. 2. 2 days later, Emmeline decided that her worry over Alexander Thornton was unnecessary. Blythe hadn't even mentioned his name. Unusually, she chattered freely about whichever suitor she favoured each week. It wasn't until a maidservant requested a coach to deliver a letter that Emmeline's suspicions flared back to life. After discovering that Sir Alexander was the recipient, and assuring the maidservant that she herself would see the letter delivered, Emmeline walked purposefully to her sister's chamber. The room was warm and cosy, hung with tapestries and carpets, and overflowing with fresh flowers from their greenhouse. Blythe turned from her dressing-table, and her smile dimmed as Emmeline held up the letter. "Blythe, dear, you know you are always to tell me before you begin a correspondence with a man not well known to us," she said, drawing up a stool to sit beside her sister. Blythe sighed. "Sir Alexander is not the sort of man you'd think highly of. But, Emmy, he is so intriguing." Emmeline could easily remember his smile, and it was still vivid in her mind. She had to proceed carefully, or else Blythe would do the exact opposite of whatever Emmeline said. "I would just feel better if I knew more about Sir Alexander," Emmeline continued, leaning forward to touch her sister's hand. "Therefore, I will deliver this letter and take stock of him myself." Where had that idea come from? Visit a strange man alone? What had gotten into her? "That is not necessary, Emmy," Blythe said, her eyes widening. "Are you concerned for my welfare, or about what Sir Alexander will think?"
she asked dryly. Blythe managed a blush.
"I'm always concerned about you. But of course you may see the letter to Alex's household, if it will make you feel better."
"Alex?" Emmeline repeated, leaning back on the stool to study her sister.
"He asked me to call him that," she replied brightly. "Will you go now? It is already past midday."
Emmeline reluctantly smiled. It was difficult to deny her sister anything. Emmeline had no difficulty persuading Humphrey, the family coachman, to take her to the Thornton Manor, upstream on the Thames. He was bald and round, and treated Emmeline and Blythe like his grandchildren. And, most important, she trusted that he would not tell her father the details. Her father took his responsibilities as the Marquis of Kent very seriously, and seldom had time for his daughters. He required weekly reports on Blythe's progress in finding a husband, but other than that, he took little interest in their lives. So long as Emmeline kept his households running smoothly and his younger daughter in check, he was satisfied. She had long since stopped wishing that he would be the father of her fancies, a man who dined with them each evening and asked about their day. Even her brothers, when they were in town, seldom saw such a side to him. While Humphrey dutifully waited by the coach, Emmeline approached the Thornton home, only to be informed by a servant that Sir Alexander was not at home, but that he might be at his lodgings above the Rooster, a tavern in Southwark. Southwark, she thought, as she turned away from the closing door. Why would a viscount's son take lodgings in a disreputable part of London, when he already had such a lovely home? "Humphrey," she said, as she approached the carriage and he held the door open, "we need to cross the river to Southwark." She saw his hesitation, but the sweet old man didn't speak until she was comfortably settled on the upholstered seat. "M'lady," he said, removing his cap to lean his head inside the coach, "let me take the letter for ye." "I must do this myself," Emmeline said firmly. "This man is wooing Blythe, and I need to take his measure. Know you the Rooster?" He bobbed his head, his worried expression remaining. "Then let us go." He hesitated, nodded, and closed the door. They journeyed over the London Bridge, with its fine merchant homes and shops. At the end of the bridge, she avoided looking at the rotting heads mounted on pikes high above the gate. She could not fathom why a nobleman's son would want to live here, in an area rife with gambling and bear-baiting, and what other sports she could only imagine. This did not look good for Sir Alexander, she thought, rubbing her hands together to warm them in the brisk air. Like Blythe's other flirtations, this one would pass, and her sister would eventually settle on a good, decent man. But until then, Emmeline could not relax her vigilance. When they reached the tavern, she left the coach, telling herself that the street did not look so very different from ones in the heart of London. There were cut-purses to be wary of, and there seemed to be more scantily dressed women about, but there were hard-working folk too, who did not have her good fortune. With a deep breath, and a cough into her handkerchief at the smell of rotting garbage and who knew what else, she looked up into Humphrey's worried face. "I'll be out shortly." She gave him a confident smile. Wait, the old man said, struggling up from the seat. "I'll be going with you, m'lady." She knew how his bones stiffened in this cold spring wind, and it made her feel guilty. "No, please sit, dear Humphrey," she said, reaching into the coach for a blanket and handing it up to him. "I will be quick, and if I am not, I give you permission to come after me. But give me some time to know this gentleman, to see what sort of man he is." Humphrey eyed the dilapidated building behind her, with its faded sign of a rooster,
and windows shuttered against the cold.
"Milady,"
he began again. But Emmeline settled her hood over her head, pulled the cloak tight about her, and set foot on the doorstep. She pushed the old wooden door open, and it was as if another world greeted her. She smelled tobacco smoke and body odours, and perfumes of the sort she'd never encountered before. The gloominess of late afternoon was barely penetrated by wax-dipped rushes, which smoked as they gave off their meagre light. Both men and women clustered at the bar, or lounged at cracked wooden tables, leaning desultorily into the shadows together. No one noticed her in her plain, dark cloak, except a grinning old man with no teeth, who reached out to feel her skirts. She rapped his knuckles smartly with her purse and sailed past him, stepping in something slimy, and was thankful for her raised soles. As she walked forward, turning sideways so that her wide skirts fit between the crowded benches about the long tables, she saw Sir Alexander. He sat alone, a tankard in his hand, a gleaming white smile on his face as he watched the rest of the men toasting the foundering of the Spanish fleet off the Irish coast. A serving girl poured him the last of her pitcher of ale, then freely kissed his cheek before sauntering away. Emmeline was mildly offended, and her ire deepened as she saw his big hands tossing a pair of dice, as if he merely awaited his next game. Was this why he rented lodgings above a tavern? Was it too difficult to find pleasure in his games from his family estate on the Strand? She knew he was a younger son, but surely his brother would not deny him a home. She studied him again, trying to see what her sister saw. His doublet was thrown open, revealing a clean white shirt with a narrow collar. His face was darkened even further by a day's growth of beard, and that, plus their surroundings, made him seem dangerous. Emmeline almost began to regret coming. No. She lifted her chin and eyed the man coldly. She had promised to deliver the letter, and by God above, she would understand what drove him. She stopped at his table. He slowly lifted his head and looked up at her with eyes as dark as the secretive corners of this bawdy place. A strange feeling crept over her, heating her skin. It wasn't nervousness, and he certainly did not intimidate her. Then why was she suddenly embarrassed, as if what she felt was somehow sinful? Sir Alexander leisurely tipped his head, trying to see beneath her hood.
"A good afternoon to you, mistress,"
he said, his voice coming so slow as to make her believe he was already in his cups. She wet her lips. "Good day, Sir Alexander. I need a moment of your time."
He shook his head. "You know my name, and have yet to reveal yours."
His gaze followed the line of her cloak, as if he could see beneath it.
"Or much of anything else," he added.
Suddenly overwarm, she took a deep, angry breath, ready to put the insufferable man in his place. Suddenly his eyes widened.
"I'll be just a moment, mistress."
He grabbed her about the waist. With a startled gasp, Emmeline fell against him and pushed at his broad shoulders. How dare he handle her so roughly? But he wasn't even looking at her. She stilled at the sound of swords being drawn from their scabbards behind her.
"Gentlemen,"
Sir Alexander said, in the same easy voice he'd used with her. But she felt the tension in every line of his body, in the hand that moved toward his own sword as he turned her about to perch on his knee. She caught her hood about her throat and looked up at two plainly dressed young men, holding their weapons far too close to her. Sir Alexander slowly moved the knee she sat on away from them, and he dropped his arm loosely about her shoulders. She longed to push him away.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?